attacks, allegations, accusations, and lawsuits, the bus ministry is just too dangerous. Think of the cost: insurance, fuel, promotions, and upkeep. My church is too small. We don't have the money, people, resources, time, or ability. I have a bus ministry, but I just can't seem to keep it alive. Many of the kids don't want to come to church. Some say that the bus ministry is an investment, but I don't see the return. I love the bus kids, but I think it's pointless. Most kids don't really care about church. All I see is a bunch of wasted time and effort. I have to say the bus ministry isn't for me.
The bus ministry is an investment in the future. It's not just a short-term investment, it's a long-term investment, and you never know the impact that you're making for the cause of Christ. We're commanded in the scripture in Acts chapter 1 to be witnesses and to spread the glorious gospel to a lost generation. When it comes to impacts, we don't always see the stories behind the lives that we are trying to reach. I remember a story many years ago in our church. We had a young man come to our Sunday school, rode the bus to church, and he asked our bus team pastor if he could say a few words to the group. And of course, he was a little hesitant. This young man had rode our buses years ago, and he had actually been in prison. He had just gotten out, and he asked if he could ride the bus and then speak to the class. So we did let him say a few words, and he encouraged the young people not to go down the road that he had gone down, and he told a little bit about his story and encouraged them to live for the Lord. It was a great testimony, and we rejoiced that he was back in church and trying to do right. That afternoon, he got home from church, and that afternoon, him and a friend were leaving to go to lunch, and a couple guys came up and got behind them and actually, sadly, killed both of them. We had the funeral at our church, and our church is not a large church. There was over 600 people at the funeral. A dozen police officers were there, given the circumstances, and we had folks all through the auditorium into the foyer. We opened the windows. They were out on the sidewalks. They were everywhere. And I remember coming into the building and finding my way up, and the only seat was actually the piano bench, and I was sitting there waiting to give a word of encouragement. And I remember Brother Tripp asking the group that had gathered, those that were sitting in the pews and those that were standing in the back foyer, he asked them, if you have ever rode the blue bus to church, I want you, those that are seated, I want you to stand, and those in the foyer, raise your hand. Literally, I think everyone in the auditorium stood, everyone in the back had their hands raised, and that's the impact of the bus ministry. The reality is we reach a lot of people with the gospel, and some make it and some do not, and but our responsibility is to give the gospel out, and we need to understand that our investments are in eternity. And sometimes we're not going to see the stories. We're not going to know the impact for the cause of Christ. And that shouldn't keep us from making the investment. We should just keep on going, keep pressing ahead, and understand that those folks that we're investing in, some are going to be a glorious illustration of what God can do, and some are going to be disappointments, but it's all for the Lord. I remember my bus captain, he invested in us. He visited us every Saturday. He didn't know that I was going to become the pastor of the church. All he knew is there was a family that was broken, that needed the gospel, that needed some love, and he gave that to us. And I would encourage you, if you're discouraged, just keep on going. The reality is we all like the mountaintop experiences. We all enjoy those times when everything goes great. But growth happens in the valley. Growth happens in those times of discouragement that God is stretching our faith. He's causing us to trust Him. And so I'd encourage you through the valley, just keep pressing on. Don't hesitate. As Peter did, jump out the boat and trust the Lord.